Alright, back to another car video. You may have noticed a large jump in quality since the last one. Well, it's not a new camera, it's actually that I just found a way to flip my phone around and use the rear camera for this without any mounting trouble. You may notice some vibration correction in, like, post-process vibration correction in this video, and it may make things look a little warped and funny, but that'll just have to do for now. I will probably get a dedicated camera in the future, but for now this one's working pretty decently. It's definitely a lot better than that blurry mess that was the front camera that I was using for a while. And by a while, I mean 2 videos. So I want to talk about Virtual Console on the Switch. We know that it's not getting day 1 Virtual Console. We were already told by Nintendo that that's not happening. But I've been seeing the rumor go around that the Nintendo Switch is going to have Gamecube Virtual Console. I'm pretty sure this started with Laura Kate Dale saying it. But keep in mind that Laura Kate Dale also said that the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller was going to have analog triggers, and it has digital triggers. And that's actually what I wanted to get into. The GameCube's controller had these awesome triggers on them that were basically analog, and then it had a digital click at the bottom. So you could kind of have controllers get that precise control with those triggers, but then you could also have a click at the bottom, so that could be used for like bursts of speed in racing games or something like that. It was a really cool system. The Switch, on the other hand, both the Joy-Cons, whether they're in the grip or they're being used by themselves, and the Pro Controller, they both use just ordinary digital triggers and digital bumpers. There's no analog triggers that we know of on the system at all. Now, that's a huge disappointment. I am wondering why Nintendo hates analog triggers so much, considering they're pretty much standard, and they had awesome analog triggers in the GameCube controller, and then for the past 10 years they've just abandoned that and used digital the whole time. I really hate that, but it's a fact. Right now, all of the officially supported controllers for the system use digital triggers. So, my problem with GameCube Virtual Console being a fact for the Switch, I'd love for it to happen. The GameCube is still one of my favorite game systems ever made, with tons of games on it, including my favorite game of all time, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. I've mentioned that a million times already. I want it to happen, but I just don't see it happening. But how would it happen, though? Let's say they did announce GameCube Virtual Console for the Nintendo Switch. How would they be able to support it? Well, here's what they would have to do, is one, they would have to work around the control schemes of the games to work with the Switch Pro Controller. So I've seen people suggest maybe rerouting that extra click at the bottom of the analog triggers to the clickable thumbsticks. That's actually what I do when I do GameCube emulation on my computer. Now keep in mind the Xbox One controller has analog triggers, so you don't lose that aspect of it. But for the click at the bottom, I use the clickable thumbsticks. That could work, but what it would not work on is games that absolutely require the analog triggers. Like, a lot of racing games use that. Luigi's Mansion and Super Mario Sunshine use it. Super Mario Sunshine is an example. You just held the analog part of the trigger down and Mario would spray while walking at varying strengths. You clicked the button and Mario stood in place and you could aim. I don't know how they would be able to replicate that on the Switch, either of the Switch controllers, because there's no analog control system. I could see maybe like holding the right digital trigger down and letting Mario walk in that way, and then using the extra left bumper, because keep in mind the GameCube just had a right bumper, it didn't have a left bumper, using the extra left bumper to make Mario stand in place. But I don't see Nintendo doing something like that. They're not really known for changing their control systems around to work around controller flaws. An alternative would be for the games to, instead of being emulation, being direct ports. Now, is the Switch powerful enough to emulate GameCube? Absolutely. The Xbox 360 was able to emulate Xbox games, and the power difference between the Xbox and Xbox 360 is a much smaller power difference than the power difference between the GameCube and the Switch. So the Switch is more than capable of emulating, but what I think that they would have to do is port the games. They would have to kind of rebuild those specific GameCube games from the ground up to work with the Switch controller. So they would get Switch button prompts, they would have their control systems changed around a bit. Even with this in place though, they would not be able to port every single GameCube game, as some games had used those analog triggers extensively. This is why you didn't see that many racing games on the Wii U. or the Wii for that matter, because of that lack of an analog trigger. The Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, and just the Joy-Cons and the grip in general, other than that stupid trigger problem that Nintendo could have fixed just by putting an analog trigger set in it, other than that, the controllers are great, and they have all the buttons they're needed to play GameCube games, and the Switch has enough power to either port or run emulation of GameCube games. But just because of that stupid controller problem, I don't see it happening, unless they work around with that. And I know a lot of people are saying that Nintendo could just make the GameCube controller adapter that was used with the Wii U, they could make that compatible with the Switch. But first off, the problem is that would leave the GameCube emulation to TV mode only, as only the dock has the regular USB ports. The Switch doesn't, it has a USB-C port. And there may be third-party, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some third-party options for this, but getting a USB-C adapter for that, or a USB-C GameCube adapter in general, is not the kind of thing Nintendo would want to do. You would have to use tabletop mode, first of all, because you couldn't use the GameCube controllers in handheld mode. They could also release some GameCube-themed Joy-Con controllers, which would be amazing. But the biggest problem with that is that Nintendo wants a consistent experience across their system. So if Nintendo released one controller with analog triggers for it while the rest had digital, then game companies would pretty much ignore those analog triggers, and it would only be used for GameCube games. And unless you're like a diehard GameCube fan, would you want to shell out another, $70-$80 for the Joy-Cons just to play GameCube games with an analog trigger? It's just not the kind of thing Nintendo would do. So what I think is that we're either not going to get GameCube Virtual Console, which sucks, it's an unpopular opinion, and I wouldn't be surprised if I get ridiculed for saying that, or they're going to have to heavily rework those GameCube games in order to work properly on Switch's Virtual Console. Anyways, that's it for this video. My next one is going to be, I'm probably going to just talk about the Nintendo Switch, before I actually end up buying it. Wow, that's a nice pothole that was just in the road right there all of a sudden. But then after that, I'm pretty much going to do my videos post-Switch. So this will be my last regular pre-Switch video. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good rest of your day.